4. Not RAV4. Forerunner.
Cheer up a little bit. It's stuck down. Yeah. All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started with the budget hearing for Department of Neighborhood Business Development. We have Councilor Hogan, Councilor Monto, Councilor Majoke, Councilor Paniagua, President Hudson, Councilor Green, myself, Councilor Allen, and Councilor Schultz, along with Commissioner Collins and Deputy Commissioner Sapansky. And what's your title? Deputy Commissioner. All right, Eric Ennis. So what we can do, if you want, I see you passed out a few handouts. I don't know if you wanted to start with your handouts or did you want to just start with the budget, but however you want to roll it out, we can just go ahead and jump right in.
Thank you, councilors. So we can start with the budget. The handout is update on a Resurgent Neighborhoods initiative. We're just talking about some of the progress to date on that, both on the commercial side and on the residential side. Why don't we start with the budget, since that's really what we're in front of you for. Department of Neighborhood and Business Development currently has 5 divisions, one of which you've talked with budget about is moving over to budget, and that is Minority Affairs. We've got Code Enforcement, which has its own budget hearing, Neighborhood Development, Business Development, Fiscal, which is the grants management part of it, and then we'll also, as you know, you've got in front of you the item to be able to create a new deputy commissioner positions, one of which is the new sustainability and planning position. So for what's in front of us today, we're looking at the neighborhood and business, basically all of it except for codes. So we've got approximately 30 positions that oversee nearly 24 ARPA projects, tens of millions of dollars worth of grants, and I'm going to have both Deputy Commissioner Sapansky and Deputy Commissioner Ennis speak to what's within their respective divisions. But overall, what you're seeing is within the budget itself, we don't have new positions this year. We had new positions that you all approved last year, so that's where the increase really came from, as well as positions that were approved throughout the year related to ARPA, so that we could actually manage those 24 projects. And so those came to you within those particular projects. So any questions on that before we'll start with business development and then go to neighborhood development?
Just to clarify the new positions, you said there aren't any new positions, but we did restructure codes and add that additional person in there.
So I misspoke. We do have the 2 deputy commissioner positions, which are new. All of those other positions that we talked about are within the codes budget.
Got it.
Yeah. So appreciate the chance to correct that.
I'm excited about those positions.
So. We all are. Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Good to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ennis.
Yep.
Thanks.
I'll grab this.
Sure.
As long as you're okay with sharing. All right. Well, good morning, councilors. So just wanted to really give an overview of the services, the work, the operations that particularly happen on the business development side of NBD, and just to talk about some of the pillars of really the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So the first one is really the financial assistance that we make available. The one thing about business development is that we are working on a wide gamut of supporting anything from the largest investments in real estate development projects and businesses here in the city, all the way down to the individual solo entrepreneur that has a business idea and really wants to get that rolling and just doesn't know where to begin. So we cover a wide spectrum there in terms of the support and services we provide. But back to the financial assistance, that really is covered by 2 particular authorities that we staff within neighborhood and business development. The first one is SEDCO, the Syracuse Economic Development Corporation. As many of you on the council are aware, that serves as the city's revolving loan fund, so it can provide small business financing, low interest financing, and then certainly at the height of the pandemic also played a role in terms of grant making to really assist small businesses that were being significantly harmed and hindered during COVID-19. The other thing is that we do staff the Syracuse Industrial Development Agency, or SIDA, and so this is for large-scale real estate, commercial, and mixed-use projects that have the ability to avail themselves of tax abatements in order to get these projects underway and off the ground. Another aspect of what we do is a lot of real estate development coordination. This is working closely with the Central Permit Office or code enforcement or even engineering on some of the infrastructure and road work that are happening around these large-scale investments, and certainly taking into consideration the impact that they're having on the surrounding neighborhood. Another example of what we do is providing technical assistance for entrepreneurs and businesses. Now, internally, this may be somebody that's working through or navigating the Central Permit Office process or needs some technical assistance on how to go from applying or submitting an application to getting that application approved. But it also goes to, if you have a small business that is working on, needs a business plan, or they're really just getting started with how do they get a DBA or how do they get a license or a certificate, we have the ability to work with them, as also refer them. We would refer them out to partners like the Onondaga Small Business Development Center and other referral partners that, again, need small business assistance. That may not be directly coming from our office or our staff, but we would have the ability to refer them to partners in the community to support them in making sure their business is set up for success. So then kind of rounding out other services that we provide, another one is strategic planning. One thing within our division, within our team, and as reflected in the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative, is really a focus and emphasis on commercial corridors throughout the city and small commercial nodes, and really expanding energy investment and revitalization well beyond downtown or just University Hill. And so we've done that through a number of different ways, whether it's programs like the Downtown Revitalization Initiative or DRI. We've purposely focused on investments in corridors like the West Onondaga Corridor or the South Ave Corridor. Or when we've applied to programs like Restore New York, this is grant funding, but we're purposely targeting commercial corridors like the Court Street or Wolf Street or Grand Ave, really focusing on those types of corridors that throughout the city we know have seen underinvestment and disinvestment, and we're trying to really leverage city resources and state resources to focus on those areas. So to really kind of just put a kind of a cherry on top of what over the last year has looked like is we've actually added more positions and expanded our team. That was something that was approved in last year's budget. So we have, for example, filled the role of Business Corridor Manager, which is directly assisting and supporting several ARPA-related initiatives for commercial corridors that the council has been supportive of. We have another program with ARPA funding that's currently open and accepting applications that will be due at the end of the month. And so this Business Corridor Manager is directly assisting and focusing on those smaller commercial nodes and helping with that revitalization activity. We have a business loan manager. This is a full-time position that's dedicated to supporting that SEDCO loan portfolio and helping applicants getting through that financing process. And then the last thing is we have backfilled the role of Director of Business Development. And so this has really dramatically expanded our capacity. And so we have a fully built-out business development team, which has really helped us with our bandwidth and capacity. So any questions just in terms of the operations or overview of business development?
You know I do. Okay, so when you talk about the SEDCO loans and the corridors, right?
Correct.
How is the information disseminated to the whole community? Because I'm looking at the numbers, and I done talked to 35 small businesses on corridors myself.
Sure.
And the numbers only reflecting and that's just one side of the city.
Sure. So one of the things that we have done, particularly with the ARPA-related programs, because we really built out a robust, different process of if you are a small microenterprise with 10 or less employees, we have a forgivable loan program where you would not have to pay back the funds. We have a small business loan program that's really tailored for a small business that's looking to gear up for growth, and then a larger scale loan fund for particularly real estate or capital projects that a small business is doing. At the time that we've launched these programs, we have done both in-person as well as virtual ways to engage the community and helping spread the word. Councilor Caldwell was directly involved, and I think you may have been in attendance at this meeting we had at the Salt City Market right around the time we launched the program, really opened it up to the community to come and hear from myself and our staff and our team about how to apply, how to walk through that process, what information that we need and we're looking for, and then our staff have been available to help assist people going through the application process. Additionally, we've done events up at the Northside Learning Center, so working particularly with refugee or new immigrant community members that are either starting a business or have a business and are looking for support. So we've done some of these in-person sessions. We have done one-on-one technical assistance. If somebody comes in and says, hey, I really just need assistance walking through this process from beginning to end. Yes, yeah, and so we've certainly done a lot of work at a neighborhood level. And then one other thing that we did is that if someone wasn't available to attend an in-person meeting, we did a virtual webinar that was live with the Onondaga Small Business Development Center. That was made available to any city entrepreneur entrepreneurs or business owners that would want to watch the webinar. We did it live to help answer questions, but then also we've posted that recording and made it available so that on anyone's convenience or at their leisure, they can go back and watch this video and watch the process about how to apply. And then even after all of that, if they still have questions or they still need help walking through, then we're available to do that. To the point about the 35 or kind of the metrics, we've seen significant activity, and certainly this was over the past year as between inflationary costs, coming out of the pandemic and out of COVID. So we do expect that there's still very strong interest in these programs. In the beginning, we set a specific application date where we needed all the applications submitted by. We heard from a lot of people that it just took some businesses and some entrepreneurs needed more time to really build out their let's say their financial documents or things. So what we've done is that we've now opened up this program on a rolling basis, meaning there is no deadline. They have the ability to keep collecting or gathering their documents, submit it to us when they're ready, and then we'll work with them on a loan application.
Thank you, Commissioner, because I just needed that to be known for everybody that's watching. It's here because you are phenomenal. I have to just say that because I've seen the work you do. I've called you about some of these small businesses, and you're very, very receptive to that. So I appreciate everything that you do.
I'll jump in as a former SEDCO board member as of last month. But when I first came on the board in 2018, I mean, a lot of the referrals were from like the downtown committee and downtown restaurants, and it was not a diverse business group, and it really has changed, and now it's throughout the city. The owners are diverse, and real credit to Eric and his staff for kind of, I'm sure there's still more work you'd like to do, but you've really expanded the pool of applicants in a way that reflects the city well. So.
Actually, with the work that we all do in the community, I've been able to refer to you about, 15, 20 businesses.
Sure, yeah.
That then they get into the process and yes, do that.
Well, I appreciate the sentiments. I mean, I think the relationship with council is so critical to be able to speak with some of these entrepreneurs or business owners. Not everyone knows that we exist, and I used to joke, people didn't even know how to spell SEDCO, let alone apply for a loan from it. And so I think, yeah. And I think we've started to really change that narrative. But the last thing, just briefly, I'll speak to is the metrics kind of speaking for themselves, is that in terms of these programs, the 62 that you're seeing in terms of the last year that we did, 50% of those were, or let me say the 66% were from minority or women-owned businesses, and then 50% of those were Black, Indigenous, or people of color entrepreneurs. And so we've really tried to work hard getting into the community for the people that have the lowest access to capital, and actually using SEDCO as kind of that gap filler, because traditional banks just oftentimes are turning away these types of applicants.
And that I wanted you actually touch on it. That was my next question, to see the percentage of applicants, especially those that are minorities, and the percentage of awardees, because that's, we have talked here about the capacity of minority businesses and sometimes how that impact their chances of getting awarded grants because of the capacity. Yep. And I just wanted to see what, in terms of, percentage, what that those that have applied and those that have actually gotten the award.
And I know I referenced some of those numbers. What I can tell you right now is that based on what we're seeing and based on forecasting, we're at least half of the applicants coming to us are falling into that category, and it is representative of the city. We want to continue to see that number grow, and we want to make sure we're supporting those that are undercapitalized. The other point I'll make too, I know I've talked a lot about the loan financing because we're just kind of starting with the metrics, but technical assistance and support, we're now doing more in this budget and what we're going to see this year around equipping and assisting and training MWBE firms that are getting ready for these large-scale investments. So one example right now is the Business Growth Accelerator. I'm working very closely with Deputy Mayor Owens on this. Is a training program we've just launched. It's going to be for state-certified MWBs that already have that certification and that have the ability to bid on construction projects, Interstate 81 being such a big one, but other projects in this community. And so this is like one-on-one training, mentorship, and support, and they'll have the ability to then kind of come out of this program. It'll be several months of training, but they'll be better equipped for, one, bidding competitively on projects, but then they'll also have our team, our staff, and then hopefully SEDCO, they'll be able to walk through if there's any capital needs or capital gaps in order to help them grow or add staff or new equipment. our office and SEDCO will be right there to support them to do that.
Okay, I said I only had one, but I have another one. Touched on it. So, Deputy Mayor and Commissioner Ennis, let me ask you this question. So when they're brought up to capacity to be able to bid, will they be bidding as primes? Or will they be going in as subs?
So and Eric could answer this, but the BGA was implemented by ESD, and it really was for the state who was finding that they weren't getting enough, even subs, for the state projects. So, and as you all know, the vast majority of our contracts are not city funded, but state funded or federal funded. So it does put us in a position. And as we're meeting these companies, Eric and I are like thinking about all the procurement we do. And these are companies that we don't see on the docket when we see contracts being let out. So we're keeping in mind as we're meeting these companies, what work can happen in the city of Syracuse and the surrounding area. Robert Short, who works for the DOT, said everyone is looking at the big shiny object with 81, but he shows us a list of state projects as well, much smaller than that one. But that is why that program has been implemented, to get them the opportunity. The absolute end goal is for them to build their capacity, be able to bid as a prime. But many of those projects, even as a sub, are pretty lucrative.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I heard you, Commissioner, say that the funding to help them with capital and things like that. So when you talk about the funding, because I know a big barrier is that when you have to bid on these projects, you have to carry $50 million worth of insurance. Not really that much, but close to it. And these companies, it's a little, do you help with that?
So I think we're speaking to between the training and capacity building that's helping address that's helping address it. I will say at the same time that this hearing is taking place, New York State DOT is having an event promoting some of these bidding opportunities. 2 of our team members, 2 of my staff are at that meeting right now, participating, meeting with MWBE firms and setting them up for, again, being able to bid on these jobs. Last point I was going to raise was around the DBE status as well, because one thing with federally funded projects, we all know about the MWBE certification, but this disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE, not enough of our firms here in Central New York have already reached that qualification. It's one thing, there's a huge gap with that. It's one of the things our staff are also talking to them about. So aside from BGA, there's also efforts going into how do you get your DBE certification so that when these competitive bidding opportunities are made, or when primes are looking for subs, and there's certainly investment and funding out there, the door does not get shut because they simply didn't have the classification.
I think we've been talking about the DBEs for a while.
Yeah, there's only a handful. It is a race and gender neutral category, but the minority-owned DBEs, I can count them on 2 hands.
And then that's what they
regional, local, yeah, federal. But just to your point of insurance and bonding, I was just in a meeting on Monday, and I was sitting next to the ESD representatives from the state.
These from acronyms, y'all.
ESD, Empire State Development. And so they were talking about, and I'm going to connect with him about just that, a program that they have resources right now that we need to tap in for, particularly that bonding issue.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So a couple last things to add on the business side, and then we'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Stefanski. One is when it comes to cannabis, that is also on the business side, all running through Eric's team as well. And so Cole King, who's one of the people at the Business Growth event right now, he's been point person on this for a long time, just keeping track on what, as New York State is evolving with their licensing process, staying on top of it with that, in the same way that Director DeShaw has been staying on top of it from a code enforcement standpoint, so that sits with them. The other point to what everyone was saying about the outreach, many of you attended, if not all of you attended, events related to the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. The intense involvement of the community members led to a successful application, and then they just doubled down on it and being able to work with the state so that they can make recommendations for the state to choose the projects that the state decided to award. But that level of involvement was exceptional. So the work really has been to get out and get to the people rather than wait for them to come here. On the issue of diversity, and one of the things that's come up in a lot of conversations recently is what does that look like from a hiring standpoint. And so this is my bridge over to neighborhood development. But we've had a total of 18 positions over the past year to fill, from the new positions and the positions that opened up because we promoted from within. So two things to note of that. Over the past year, we've had one position open up, and that was due to retirement. And I think that's striking because of what that's meant around our ability to retain employees. Of those positions that we've filled, 72% of them have been for people that are identify either as minority, ethnically, racially, religiously, disability.
What's the percentage? 72?
72%. So we have been both building the pipeline and utilizing the pipeline through promotion as well, just working hard to make sure, and openly LGBTQ, at every way in which we define diversity.
Was that a result of targeted recruitment, or was it just?
It's a result of us hiring the best people for the job.
Okay.
Yeah, flat out best people for the job. And there's a lot of ways to make sure that we're valuing what it takes to do the work of these two divisions in a way that represents the community. So
is it my understanding that, Mike, all the leadership positions at NBD are all filled?
Currently, so we've got the two in front of you for the next session with the deputy commissioner positions, but right now within Michelle's team and Eric's team, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's one. I think we've got a planner position that's posted right now, and that's it at the moment, right? Yeah.
And I think this is beating a dead horse, but we have talked repeatedly, based on best practices out there and observation of what other big organizations are doing, and the narrative of what is supposed to happen and what is not happening. Where as a city, I think we are doing a little better than most organizations in terms of where the bottom is all color, right? And the top is all white,
right?
And I think being able to be cognizant of that and being able to balance that, I think this body here, we really want to see that, and that I know to be able to balance something like that, it's a leadership question, right? It's a leadership question. And when you embark on that, it's also about hiring managers that understand that philosophy and that move. And I think as a city, I think we are moving into that direction. And I appreciate this body for always pressing that idea forward and having the executive to also recognize the need of having something like that.
Yeah. So. Appreciate it. I'm now going to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Sabansky to talk about neighborhood development.
Thanks. So just to kind of talk a little bit about within neighborhood development, some of how we're organized. So a lot of the work that we're doing is really interdisciplinary throughout the entire department. So we have our neighborhood grants team, largely responsible for all of the administration of our HUD dollars. So a lot of the way that those grants are structured is kind of a one person per grant requirement that we have for HUD. So they're really kind of the content experts and the folks that are working very, very closely with all of our different nonprofit groups and agencies that are funded through those programs. At the same time, they're also working very, very closely with our neighborhood planners who focus a lot on the different aspects of kind of constituent and people engagement, and who are also doing a lot of different levels of kind of program coordination. So particularly within the planning department, as we get kind of one-off grants that we might get from the state that are tied to kind of certain need areas, the example of that being kind of the Cities Rise grant that's been targeted towards code enforcement, some of the zombies work work that we've been doing, all of those typically we're writing into those grant applications different types of programs that we're adding into the city, and so then the kind of administration of that, planners serve those kind of dual roles as acting as kind of neighborhood ambassadors for particular geographic areas, but then those sort of content expertise areas as well. And then lastly, a lot of that work is driven really closely. Within the last year, we've been able to build some capacity within our data and mapping. Previously, a lot of those roles were had to, the planners were wearing all of those different hats, which is great just in terms of kind of like multifaceted, builds a lot of different people that can fill in different areas. But in terms of kind of their ability to just really focus and on kind of core strength areas, we're really excited about our ability to really expand our capacity as we look at kind of impact and evaluation of all of our program dollars, and making sure that kind of the money that we're putting out there is working and having the intended impacts. What we've seen kind of, and we'll get into the budget numbers later, but I think within kind of ARPA overall, really, as Eric was saying before, we've been able to do some really things that I'm pretty proud of, just from kind of funds that we've been able to put in and expanding capacity in ways that we haven't been able to. The numbers that we're seeing in the budget are really reflective of, on the neighborhood side, our standard kind of HUD entitlement grants, but if you add in the impact that we've been able to have through all the ARPA funds that have run through neighborhood and business development, but particularly on the neighborhood side, in a lot of these areas, we've really doubled, tripled what we would be doing. So I think that's pretty important. And what we're seeing in terms of kind of where those are going, if we look at where we're routing things for homeowner support with home headquarters, we've had 450 projects that across closing cost assistance, SHARP, urgent care, emergency repairs for homeowners. In all of those different 4 grant categories, anywhere from 68% to 83% of those have been to Black and Latino homeowners. So very similar trends kind of on the MWB growth side we're seeing in direct supports to households on the neighborhood side. We're also really, again, kind of in concert under the Resurgent Neighborhoods Initiative, in all of the green areas on the maps that you have in front of you that are adjacent to the commercial corridors, being really strategic about how we're targeting the work that we're doing across these different grant programs. So looking at Resurgent Neighborhoods infill dollars and lining those up in the same areas that we are for strategic property stabilizations and demolitions that the land bank is doing. Excuse me. So overall, with land bank projects, we've had over 160 that have been completed to date, the majority of those being demolitions in preparation for future infill development, or just kind of one house on the block where we need to kind of stabilize the overall area so that we can make that infill more impactful. Looking at kind of infill construction overall, we have almost 11 million of our ARPA funding that we're looking at is in some way, it's either been completed, actively under construction, or we're tentatively setting aside pending developers' capacity to get other New York State financing. A lot of the, particularly on the affordable rental housing side of things, there's most of those projects that are going through require some level of LIHTC funding from the state. So we're working closely with several of our different qualified construction firms to be kind of teeing some of those projects up. So hoping to be able to get some good news about the Creekside Commons, Creekside Landing project, excuse me, with Housing Visions on the affordable rental side, which would be 52 units of affordable, mostly 2-family properties, and then one 20-unit mixed-use building along West Onondaga Street. Also looking at some other projects on the Delaware area, a lot of kind of strategic work that we've been doing in collaboration with the land bank there to get all of those things ready. Additionally, hoping with Creekside, a lot of work that we're hoping to see on the south side, so West Colvin, Beard, Midland, some collaboration that we've been doing with Tiny Home for Good on Richmond and Wall Street on the west side as well, and really where we can in across all of those things, as much kind of scattered site work within the north side as we can, kind of understanding some of the challenges that we have there with topography and lot size, and just trying to be as creative as possible. The other thing I just kind of want to flag too, that those are all, everything that I just mentioned there in terms of kind of new development that we're doing on the housing side. We also have about $5.6 million in other affordable rental housing that's going on, so either through some level of our entitlement grants or in our CDBG-CV or home ARP funding that we're doing. So 61 units overall we have under construction, projects that we're looking at, a lot of our CDBG-CV dollars that we're working with in collaboration with New York State HCR. Those projects are largely targeted to work of Syracuse Model Neighborhood Corporation along MLK, South State Street, Kennedy, Lafayette, getting all of those properties back in safe, long-term kind of healthy housing conditions. We have some funds in the out of home ARP has enabled us to do some work to support the Catholic Charities Men's Shelter on East Erie Boulevard, the 1800 block. Also have some funds helping to support the project that Housing Visions is doing with Pendleton. On the emergency rental repair side, I think last year when that was one of the things that we had that was put in the budget from ARPA dollars, really kind of looking to take the model that we've applied to our blight busting work, targeted at vacant properties, and apply that over to occupied rental properties to do property repairs in cases where the property owners have been negligent past code compliance windows. They're really draining resources of code enforcement. They're creating situations where we're having to do unnecessary relocation of residents. All of those things cause a lot of instability, and they also use resources in a way out of our relocation dollars where we could.
I just want to ask a question. When you talked about the shelters and the different things, I'm looking at the eastern end of the city, right? And it's saying Westmoreland, Erie, Bruce, and Genesee. What part of Westmoreland are you moving on?
So just we're looking, that's kind of one of the areas where we had identified as something that we want to try to find all the places where we can do different interventions. So whether it's getting site control of a property, doing some level of zombie property work, blight busting, brownfield development.
Are those houses going to have to be demolished, or are those vacant lots the most of them?
So I think in that particular area, I'll be very transparent that it's one of, as we talked about last week and many times, it's an area that is a challenge. So kind of for specific development, I don't have a project that I can point to of like, I can say with great certainty that it is going to happen. There are 2 sites on Crowley that we're looking at really strongly. I think that the challenge that we're really trying to kind of strike a balance with here is that as we've seen kind of our ability to really make a strong impact, we have to kind of tee a lot of things up so that we can set those areas up for success. If we just do a kind of a drop in a bucket here and a drop in a bucket there, we're going to keep recreating kind of some of the same challenges for longer. So we're really kind of trying to play a long game with it, but it's an area, the reason that it's on the map is because it's an area that we're committed to figuring out.
Is that Genesee north of Genesee Street mostly, the blocks north?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, those are all of the areas where you really see the need for public intervention to. It's spotty, right? Yeah, and I will say too, kind of a little bit further up, like Didyma, some of those streets. I mean, I live on Ridgeway, so I am in that area all the time. All of those streets would really kind of, the strategy I think there is really what can we do to make sure we're targeting as many resources as possible through home headquarters and some of those property repair programs. What can we think about doing kind of more creatively based on some of the things we're finding from the housing study to really incentivize kind of larger scale property renovations? What can we do to make sure that we're incentivizing home ownership in those areas for people at 80% income? So it's a little bit different tool for the strategy at hand, but it's something that we're very committed to.
Michelle, is there a defined strategy? I know Kimon works on this probably as far as zombie properties go. I mean, do we have? I know everything is a different issue with. Yeah, so
essentially, kind of the loose routing that we take with them is that if a property is tax delinquent, typically we assume that the energy that we're going to put into it is to get it over to the land bank. If it is not tax delinquent and it's vacant, that is usually some indication that there's a zombie property, a bank that is in the chain of title that is paying those taxes consistently. So Camone works very, very closely with our corporation counsel to do kind of the process that New York State has set out for us, where we can work with the servicers to essentially kind of make them apprised of what their obligations are, tell them what the violations are, tell them what we expect of them. There's a lot of those, as kind of New York State in particular has put in some of these larger regulations, a lot of these banks have kind of devoted staff teams to kind of manage their property portfolios. So Camone and a couple of people on her team work really closely with those people. So we try to work with them to the extent possible. Like really, it's much like any other type of code violation. Like we just need to know what's happening, what the plan is, and try to kind of keep moving it along. We do leverage blight busting when we need to on properties, but really what we're seeing after kind of the first round of zombie funds, and we've seen kind of similar things in some ways to the emergency repair program, even just in very early stages, but it doesn't take that many of these to do before people realize that we're serious about it, and like there is actually going to be a consequence that is going to hit a pocketbook. So it was a very proud moment in our office for, I know Camone in particular, this was one project where it was one that was in a portfolio of somebody that we were working with, where it was kind of like they were dragging their feet on it, and we're like, all right, well, we're just going to blight bust it. And then sure enough, pretty shortly after they got a bill, it got sold. So
that's outstanding, because that's been a real issue for a lot of years, and I'm glad you guys went on the path to find an end to the path as far as like finding a way to do it. Because it's a big problem somewhere. So
yeah, and again, I think a lot of that is kind of it's really easy to kind of define all of our success just in terms of like holes in ground and ribbon cuttings, but there's so much else that goes into it like that it's really kind of doing all of those things together is.
I mean, a lot of times you'd contact the bank that supposedly held the mortgage, and you couldn't find the person
right.
to talk to.
Right. So yeah.
Unbelievable.
So the strategy is really like we have those networks to be able to do that. So I think there's many different times that any combination of you have reached out about particular properties, and we can kind of dig in and figure out, is there a sign, kind of who is that contact that we can get a hold of, and if they have not already gotten a friendly letter from corporation counsel, make sure that gets in process and that there's escalation accordingly.
Well, thank you.
If we can make progress in that pocket, I know President Hudson and I have been beating that drum for a long time, that all around that Parkside Commons, that whole area right there, it's just a slow decline, in housing stock. So it matters for sure.
You just mentioned the relocation. Can you talk a little bit more about that, like what goes into that and why the numbers are 50% less than they were?
Yeah, so a lot of that is work that we do with Catholic Charities for situations where properties are in unfit condition with code enforcement, and so unfortunately they're not safe for habitation. People need to go elsewhere. What we have seen, I think the drop in numbers where you're...
So we had more funding through CDBG-CV.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I think where a lot of those funding have come in, like I mentioned before, this is working through our standard kind of pool of HUD entitlement dollars. If you add in the relocation support that's happened with CDBG-CV for those services, that has kind of helped offset that, so it's actually relatively comparable. I think the other big thing that we've had is through the support of CDBG-CV is just rent relief. So I think we're just seeing like some of this is still COVID related that is kind of impacting some of these numbers.
And while you're on that topic, I just want to just dispel some misinformation that's floating around the community. So when you talk about the unfit, and I got calls about Skyline, and I called the commissioner, but I just want you guys to dispel the myth that you're just evicting these people.
Right.
Yeah, so specific to Skyline, and I appreciate the chance to address that. So private transaction between the seller and the buyer. The current seller's done something that the current buyer's done something that the Green National Company has never done, and that's have ownership meet face to face with the residents, which we greatly appreciated. They have made the decision that in order to address the severe issues within the building, the tenants need to be relocated out of there. And so tenants that are in good standing and will work with them will be relocated to their other properties. And tenants that have lease violations, they're looking for them to leave, but they've stated publicly that all security deposits will be returned for anybody that, even if they want to leave all their stuff behind, they are covering the relocation costs for people that are staying with them. They will write into leases the ability to return to Skyline for people that will stay with them. That said, we know that there's a number of people that live there that have been contributing to some of the problems, and it's not a city issue as to who makes those decisions.
Okay, I just wanted, because I know that after I got the calls, I called you, and they're relocating them to different green properties after they renovate those.
After they renovate those properties, and what ownership said to the residents in front of the deputy mayor and myself is that the residents will have a chance to inspect the property first, sign off on the condition of the property before they're relocated into it.
Okay, because I think I got 3-4 calls the same day.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yep. And what we recommend to any resident is to go talk directly to the new management.
Thank you.
Sure.
So the housing market survey, where is that now?
Sure. So we are almost to the closeout point of what's been a project that we've been working on since October to do a kind of comprehensive housing market study. The purpose of that really being to kind of establish understanding all of the different data sources that are going in and impacting our housing market. So there's a lot of questions, kind of Micron coming. We just had, even outside of Micron, we were planning to do this anyway. So I think timing has aligned really, really well for us to be able to kind of dig into those numbers, get a foundational understanding of like what is the state that we're dealing with the next plan being to kind of use that as how we think about how we're informing our strategy, right? So really just kind of bringing everyone in around the numbers and then taking kind of some preliminary recommendations of what does a strategy need to make sure that we include for us to kind of move forward with that intentionally. So we just had our 4th of 5th kind of stakeholder engagement convenings yesterday with the CZB team that was in town. The final study is working. We're putting kind of finishing touches on it, and then we expect it to be delivered in the last week of May 22nd. So we'll be coordinating with the council to kind of do a fuller briefing on that as that rolls out. You can also check out, if you're interested in looking at any of the kind of halfway point information, there's a website, SyracuseHousingStudy.com, where you can take a look at what has been put together so far, and happy to circulate that to you all.
So, go on, Jimmy.
Does the study look at rent too?
Yes.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, and really kind of looking at it looks at cost, it looks at affordability. I think the things that have really come clear are just kind of the magnitude of the challenges that we have as it pertains to kind of balancing the affordability gap and the market gap. So those two things.
Market gap.
Yeah, and so those two things really kind of encompass the crux of all of our housing issues that we have. So kind of capacity of households to pay because of low incomes, and then the actual cost of what it costs to do construction, the cost of our deferred maintenance, the number that was estimated if we were to just like have a blank check that we could solve all of our housing challenges, we're looking at a cool $3 billion.
How much?
So $3 billion. So
I mean, you don't have to be a genius to kind of figure out that the gap between what people are making and what they can afford to pay for these.
Right.
I mean, we have a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's kind of the, like in some ways, I think for a lot of people that kind of work in this area in any way, I don't know that there's going to be any conclusions within this study that are really earth-shattering for anyone. Like in some ways, we kind of, like, we know these things. I think what we're really trying to establish with this is kind of that space of, okay, so understanding what we know, what does that mean about what we have to do next, and kind of how we move forward most intentionally when you're talking about numbers that are that large.
But the impact of this, I mean, is going to be exacerbated by obviously more people move into town. What I fear is that we're going to be siloed a little bit.
So
city, county, the surrounding communities.
So yeah, and
So
we're
certain
working.
type of housing will go in the city, other types of housing will go around the city.
Sure. So, and we're working very closely with our county counterparts within the context of this study. There's been several different county staff department folks that have been involved between county development, DSS, county planning. So we're working very closely with them on that. I think you hit it exactly kind of on the head. Really, what the study is really making clear is kind of the threading the needle between how do we solve the market gap without overthrowing the affordability gap. And so either of those levers that you push has impact on the other one, and so we have to be really kind of coordinated in that approach. So all of those things are things that we're looking at and working to be really intentional about.
Okay.
Michelle, can I hit the budget on page 139 for a hot minute? Okay, so when I'm looking at both lines, the 100 lines, it says less reimbursement from other funds. Is that all ARPA, or are those different grants?
Sorry, Councilor. So that one, the 59-100 line?
Yes.
So that's related specifically to my salary, and that is CDBG.
No, I get that, but I'm looking at the 519100 line, where it says less reimbursement. I'm trying to figure out,
Yep.
Are those ARPA reimbursements?
No, that's CDBG.
Okay, that's CDBG.
Yep.
On both lines.
So yeah, so then when you look at under, so that was for personal services, under contractual and other expenses, when we look at that 254, that's going to be a variety of different grants within that.
So that's not just CDBG, that's a...
So that particular one, when it's under contractual and other expenses, that's a variety of grants.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That's good. Cuts down the cost.
All right, did you have anything else on yours? Okay.
We love our work. We could talk forever, but you have other business to do. We want to be respectful of that.
Okay, any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you. This concludes our budget hearing for neighborhood business development.